Hey, y'all, I'm meteorologist Erica Lopez.
And I'm meteorologist Matt Cappucci. 2024 has been a heck of a year.
From wildfires to floods to droughts and hurricanes, 2024 had it all.
Jordan Hall and I spent months crisscrossing the entire country documenting hurricanes and northern lights, giant hail tornadoes, and pretty much everything there was. And Erica, I know that you and Mike kind of held down the fort many times during big events.
And we've been here nonstop, so let's look back at just how wild this year has been. Kicking off the new year in January 2024, it was full of extremes. Heavily influenced by El Nino, globally, it ranked as the 10th wettest January on record. And to top it off, it was the warmest January ever recorded. Some notable events were as follows. On January 9th, the National Weather Service in Seattle issued its first blizzard warning in over 11 years for the mountainous areas surrounding the city. By January 16th, New York City finally broke its 701-day streak without significant snowfall with 1 inch of snow. Then on January 18th, an Arctic outbreak reached as far south as Texas, with temperatures 20 to 35 degrees below normal in parts of the plains. And to wrap it up, from January 22nd to the 25th, Texas and Louisiana saw over a month's worth of rain in just a few days. It was a wild start to the year.
On February 26th, westerly winds brought bone-dry air across the southern plains. There was a critical risk for wildfires. Red flag warnings stretched from the Texas Permian Basin all the way to the Corn Belt of Iowa and Illinois. Storm tracker Jordan Hall was in the Texas Panhandle when disaster struck. A fire ignited north of Stinnett in Hutchinson County.
This wildfire brought some of the most extreme wildfire conditions that I've ever witnessed with my own eyes. The speed of which this fire was moving, the dry fuels in its path, and the lack of roadways made this fire extremely difficult to fight, especially for air attack and firefighters, as wind speeds were way too high for firefighters to fight this battle from the air a majority of the time.
Within a day, it was bigger than Disney World. The fire was rapidly spreading at a jogging pace. By mid-March, 1.05 million acres had burned. 2 people were dead. So were 7,000 head of cattle. That same storm system sent a cold front east, bringing severe weather to the Chicagoland area on the 27th. Rockford, Illinois saw their warmest winter day on record, hitting 78 degrees. But then, temperatures crashed. Violent thunderstorms formed along the cold front. Parameters were maxed out near Chicago. A dozen tornadoes touched down between northeast Illinois and Gary, Indiana. A lack of ice on the Great Lakes let warmer temperatures surge farther north, fueling the off-season outbreak. Then we flipped to March. On the 13th, another round of thunderstorms erupted over Kansas, tracing a psychedelic swirl on radar. This was super cool. Jordan Hall was in the town of Alta Vista to see what that looked like.
The Alta Vista, Kansas tornado was the first photogenic tornado of the year going into 2024. And that tornado was interesting because the storm earlier in the day seemed to struggle all the way up until just before sunset when it had a weird boundary interaction. And that's when we got the drone up, sped out ahead of it, and droned a very photogenic tornado as it churned into the darkness and continued off to the northeast.
On March 14th, the largest hailstone ever recorded in Pontotoc County, Oklahoma formed, measuring an astounding 5.25 inches. That is larger than a grapefruit. This shattered the previous record of 3.25 inches set on March 26 of 2017. For this record-breaking hailstone to form, the updraft speed exceeded well over 100 miles per hour, a remarkably rare event that allowed the stone to reach its incredible size.
About a week later, dry air and strong winds helped ignite more than 100 wildfires in the mountains of Virginia. 5 homes were destroyed. Skies turned orange amid the smoky haze. I saw them from a train. I was taking a train down to Florida. Then April rolled around, and it was time for something I've been waiting for since childhood: the eclipse. Initially, we had planned to be in Erica's home state of Texas, but the forecast wasn't looking too good. I don't think I've ever been so stressed. You can ask Erica.
Definitely a stressful time, and the amount of phone calls and stress texts between the both of us with cloud forecasts, it was astounding.
The weather was so iffy that at the last minute, I decided to rebook everything and made arrangements for 15 friends and family to relocate across the country. All right, it is April 3rd, and we are repositioning to Maine. I think Maine, but somewhere in the Northeast, which means I get to lug these Starlink satellites, camera gear, that, and everything in my back. It's like 200 pounds worth of stuff. We made it up there on April 6th in the Magic Eclipse bus.
All right, it's April 6th. We're at a rest stop in Augusta, Maine, fueling up. This thing takes a lot of gas.
The night before, we had a campfire. I was feeling pretty good. Morning came quickly, but it was clear. We snagged some Eclipse donuts and then got into position. And what we saw was otherworldly.
3, 2. All right, here we go. Look at that corona. Look at that. Holy.
Oh my God!
Oh my gosh. Look at that corona, how dynamic it is. Oh my goodness.
But the best part was sharing something magical with my family and my best friends.
You won't be able to see that on camera, but it's cool. All my favorite people. The 360 sunrise. And a moment that is unlike anything you can possibly imagine as we stare at the sun's atmosphere.
Then it was tornado season, and things got crazy with a top-tier outbreak on April 26th. There were more than 100 reports of tornadoes, and Jordan Hall and I were there on the ground.
The Lincoln, Nebraska tornado will likely go down as the most photogenic tornado of the 2024 tornado season. And this tornado touched down on the northeast side of Lincoln, Nebraska, and caused significant damage. As this tornado moved towards I-80, it became super photogenic, a perfect stovepipe all the way to the ground with little to no rain around it. There was actually more debris raining down than there was rainfall, and this tornado went on to throw multiple vehicles off of I-80 and destroy a lot of homes and a lot of businesses. But something to note, this was just the beginning of a significant tornado outbreak on April 26th, and as this tornado crossed Interstate 80, it began to rope out. But something to note was that the supercell was becoming cyclic, and as this tornado was roping out, the brand new tornado was forming basically like a handoff with the supercell just behind it as that one planted and continued on with another tornado.
As Jordan was driving on Interstate 80, I was to the northwest watching a different tornado tear through Seward, Nebraska. It threw a semi off the road right in front of me. By mid-afternoon, a new deadly tornado was touching down in Minden, Iowa.
As the day continued, I found myself driving through the small town of Minden, Iowa to get myself in position for the next storm that looked like it could be capable of producing a tornado. I parked about a half a mile to the east of Minden on a hill and turned back towards the town where I actually saw the storm producing what went on to be the Minden-Harlan tornado. And this tornado started out very wispy, multiple little funnels going around each other like a carousel, a ring around the rosy type thing. And within a matter of seconds, it turned into a large, violent wedge tornado barreling towards the town of Minden. As it approached Minden, I started to witness extreme damage, extensive damage, ongoing into the town. People's homes getting destroyed, businesses getting launched into the air, and I just kept the camera rolling, but I knew I needed to move as the tornado continued to move towards my location.
I was to the northeast in Tennant, Iowa, and followed the tornado as it blasted through the town of Harlan. It grew to over a mile wide. I had never seen anything that crazy, and it turns out that was just the start to a hyperactive month.
On May 6th, a high risk was issued for much of the Oklahoma region by the Storm Prediction Center in Norman. This was for a possible tornado outbreak with a high-end ceiling for strong, long-track tornadoes. And as this event went on throughout the day, it wasn't until the evening overnight hours that we started to see this forecast verify. There was one renegade storm that fired out ahead of the line that went on to produce the violent, deadly Barnsdall, Oklahoma tornado. This tornado went through Barnsdall, Oklahoma late into the overnight hours and unfortunately killed 2 people and injured dozens of people. I arrived early in the morning and began helping with search and rescue and droned the first light images as the sun came up in the morning. The first images that morning in Barnsdall were catastrophic. Pure devastation, homes wiped off the foundation, and trees left completely debarked.
On April 30th, 2 tornadic supercells formed in northeast Kansas. I encountered this one near the town of Corning. Frankly though, May was just downright crazy. I chased this tornado near Anson, Texas on May 2nd. Just 30 minutes later, another one touched down north of Abilene near the town of Hawley. It destroyed the home of a family of 4, earning a high-end EF3 rating with 165-mile-per-hour winds. On May 3rd, a massive rain-wrapped tornado occurred near Robert Lee, Texas. On May 10th, something mesmerizing happened. A G5 geomagnetic storm, the first since 2005. Explosions of magnetism and plasma from this sunspot, active region 3664, were to blame. The magnetic shockwave slammed Earth's magnetic field, sending the northern lights all the way down to the mid-latitudes. They were directly overhead in Iowa. They shimmered red in Arkansas, and they were even purple down in South Carolina.
And reaching as far south as Florida. I'll never forget being on the beach in Jacksonville, completely shocked and mesmerized. It was my first time seeing them, although barely visible to the naked eye.
And I was in the Badlands of South Dakota, left mesmerized. Seeing the lights dancing and twirling above my head was just absolutely breathtaking.
On May 19th, thunderstorms with destructive winds hit Kansas, but the tornadoes were hitting Oklahoma.
May 19th was an extremely active day across western Oklahoma. Multiple tornadoes were reported as the storms continued to move east towards the Oklahoma City region. At 9:30, I found myself just south of El Reno, Oklahoma, when a new storm had formed and actually started producing a tornado that went on to do damage in Yukon. I got my drone up in the air and managed to film this tornado as it churned away in the dark.
Then on May 21st, tornadoes tore through Iowa. My chase began mid-afternoon near Villisca, where I was sideswiped by this EF3. Then a second tornado formed near Brooks, Iowa. And I gotta say, this one honestly caught me off guard. It looked like nothing on radar, but it would go on to become the infamous Greenfield tornado.
Oh, golly.
On May 21st, I found myself sitting in Corning, Iowa, where I would be droning a large, dangerous tornado moving directly towards me. As this tornado crossed a couple hundred yards in front of me, I continued to follow it off to the east. As this tornado dissipated, I could see the beginning of what went on to be the Greenfield, Iowa tornado a few miles to my east. As I continued to try to catch up to this tornado, that's when I came across extreme damage. Multiple wind turbines were completely torn down, farmsteads completely wiped off the map, and as I got into Greenfield, Iowa, that's when I got my drone up and saw the pure extent of the damage. As it was very narrow, it was extremely strong. You can see where some houses are only missing a couple shingles and other houses are completely erased from the foundation. That's where I went on to do search and rescue and help assist first responders pulling people out of the rubble.
On May 23rd, a strong to violent tornado occurred in southwest Oklahoma near the town of Duke. But fortunately, didn't hit anything at all. That meant no rating. Instead, scientists were able to surround it, probing it for data. Honestly, it was like the most convenient tornado ever because it just danced for cameras and didn't bother anyone. On May 28th, I encountered DVD-sized hail in Hockley County, Texas. And I froze it because who doesn't have a car freezer? And then I brought it to researchers who made 3D scans. So now I have like 1 million of these around my apartment. I guess perfect Christmas gifts, really. Now on June 5th, I was giving a speech in Louisiana, but there was a warm front lurking right near Washington, D.C., and keep in mind I live in D.C. Machine learning models suggested extra twist or helicity along that front could favor a few little tornadoes. And naturally, Erica, best meteorologist ever, was on top of it.
Yeah, quite an interesting day. Despite the area being only under a level 1 out of 5 marginal severe risk, the ingredients were just favorable, and I anticipated tornado-conducive conditions and published a push video for Washington, D.C. that morning. My decision validated when the event overperformed.
And I have to brag about my colleague Victor Thaxton. He's a meteorology student, an incredibly talented meteorologist and storm chaser, and tracked down the tornado as it tore through Poolville, getting this unbelievable video. That was right around supper time when the tornado was touching down near Poolsville, which is northwest of DC. Look at the hook on radar. By nightfall, there'd be 5 storms all spinning at the same time as those cells drifted towards Baltimore. In the end, 13 tornadoes touched down. It's like I always say, never trust a warm front in the summertime. June was pretty cool, especially June 26th. At 5:26 p.m. on June 26th, GOES-U, that next generation weather satellite, launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Our team was there. It was incredible.
On its 10th flight in history, a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket successfully launched the GOES-U satellite from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. GOES-U is the fourth and final satellite in the current series of advanced weather satellites. As planned, the rocket's two side boosters returned to Earth about 8 minutes after liftoff, and us of MyRadar, we definitely felt the energy of the boosters. Now operational, GOES-U will deliver continuous coverage of weather and hazardous environment conditions across much of the Western Hemisphere.
Then the tropics awoke early in July, way ahead of schedule, with Beryl, the earliest Category 5 on record. It slammed Carriacou, Grenada as a Category 4.
As Hurricane Beryl was making a catastrophic landfall in Carriacou, I made my trip to Tulum, Mexico, where Beryl was forecasted to make landfall a few days later. As Beryl approached the Yucatan, it encountered some dry air and shear and landfalled as a Category 2 storm, doing damage to any loose items and some roofs.
After Mexico, it hit Houston on July 8th with 80 to 90 mile-per-hour winds and a foot of rain.
After riding out Beryl on the Yucatan Peninsula, I then flew to Texas, where I encountered another landfalling Hurricane Beryl in Surfside, Texas, where conditions were actually stronger than in the Yucatan, and we saw a significant storm surge out the entire town of Surfside Beach and left Houston completely flooded.
As Beryl made landfall and moved inland, it spawned at least 69 tornadoes across 6 states: Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kentucky, Indiana, and New York, marking the most tornadoes from a U.S. storm since Hurricane Rita in 2005. Tornadoes often occur in the right front quadrant of tropical systems, where warm, humid air and wind shear combine to fuel severe thunderstorms. In Beryl's case, these conditions led to several days of tornado activity from July 8th to July 10th. Then on August 5th, Hurricane Debby made landfall near Steinhatchee, Florida, as a Category 1 storm with 80-mile-per-hour winds and a central pressure of 979 millibars. The storm caused widespread flooding with 8 to 12 inches of rain in southeast Madison and Lafayette counties, while areas near Suwannee and Gilchrist counties saw up to 15 inches, compounded by a 3 to 5 foot storm surge along the coast, still recovering from Hurricane Idalia less than a year earlier.
But weirdly enough, peak season was eerily quiet for the tropics. Experts were baffled, like nothing was going on for a month. But it had to come back to life at some point, and it surely did.
On September 11th, Hurricane Francine made landfall in southern Louisiana as a borderline Category 2 storm with maximum sustained winds of 100 miles per hour and a central pressure of 972 millibars. It was the fourth hurricane of the 2024 season and the third to make landfall in the continental U.S. this year.
I was down there chasing, and I had to wait for freshwater flooding in New Orleans, all that rainfall, to recede before I could even get to my hotel, which, by the way, flooded too. The city got 8.43 inches. Then there was Helene, a completely different beast. It rapidly intensified and hit the Florida Big Bend on September 26th. I was in Perry, Florida, where winds were gusting about 90 to 100 plus miles per hour.
On September 26th through 27th, a heavy rainfall event known as a predecessor rain event impacted the southern Appalachians ahead of Hurricane Helene. Orographically enhanced precipitation fueled by an atmospheric river-like transport of moisture from Helene, combined with a favorable synoptic setup to deliver significant rainfall to the region's high elevations. A total of 15 to 30 inches of rain fell, leading to extreme flooding that claimed nearly 200 lives. Many affected communities are still recovering and face a long road ahead. Then on October 5th, Milton formed and rapidly intensified from a tropical depression in the Gulf to a Category 5 hurricane in just 2 days. It produced winds of 180 miles per hour, making it one of the strongest Atlantic storms ever observed.
Before the storm got here, it started producing tornadoes, all the way from Miami up to Lauderdale, Florida. That morning, I made the decision to sprint out of my hotel room and blast east towards Lauderdale to see if I could see one of these tornadoes. And within minutes of getting there, I had my drone in the air and we droned a strong tornado passing just east of Lauderdale, Florida. And this was one of dozens of significant tornadoes that ripped throughout Florida that day.
Hurricane Milton weakened to a Category 3 storm before making landfall in Siesta Key, Florida the evening of October 9th. Milton also tore the roof off of Tropicana Field in Tampa.
Wind gusts across Venice were significant, causing a lot of power lines to explode, and it looked just like the 4th of July, with the reflection of these explosions off the low clouds as Milton was making its approach. Multiple power lines, trees, and roofs were ripped and thrown all over the roadways, and it made it very difficult to navigate, especially as storm surge began to push its way in and cause significant flooding throughout the region.
For Milton, I was in between high-rise hotels in Sarasota, which kind of funneled the wind, but I was getting gusts to like 110 plus miles per hour, which actually peeled off panels from my vehicle. At one point, a bench, like this big metal cement bench thing, flew off a hotel roof and crashed to the ground next to me.
Oh! Guys! Oh my gosh! Holy, did you guys see that at home?
In a day after Milton made landfall, and for the second time this year, the northern lights were visible in Florida. I also witnessed these from Texas, a very rare event, and for me, the second time this year I was seeing them.
Things finally settled down in November in the tropics, but not the mid-latitudes. A double bomb cyclone slammed the Pacific Northwest late in the month. It swung an atmospheric river into California too. Then in early December, a potent lake-effect snowstorm plastered parts of upstate New York with up to 65 inches, 5.5 feet of snow. There was even a bolt of thunder snow that was captured on a webcam striking the ground in Watertown, New York. I know we've talked about it a million times, Erica, but it really has been such a crazy year. But the good news, no matter what 2025 brings, we'll be here.
We'll keep you ahead of the storm, so follow us on social media to stay safe and informed for the next year.
Follow MyRadar on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Download MyRadar on iOS, Android, Amazon Alexa, and Windows.